Hey, everybody, welcome to Crackpot, the podcast where each and every week we dive into a different conspiracy theory and we discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts. I'm Tim.
And I'm Zach.
Hey, Zach.
Timothy.
What do you know?
My man, welcome back.
Thank you.
I feel like we took kind of a hiatus there.
There was a couple-week hiatus.
Yeah.
I think.
Summer vibes.
Times, yeah. Not that the listener would know, because we are diligent.
That's right. And you know what, folks? That's the way we like it.
That's the way we like it.
So
predictable. Diligent. Predictably diligent. Okay, do you remember a little while back we did an episode about a guy who was hiding treasure all over the country? Actually, no, just one bit of treasure, and he said it was in a park somewhere, and a bunch of people went looking for it, and it was eventually found.
Are you talking about a one Forrest Fenn by
That
chance?
is exactly who I'm talking about. So that was a fun episode to do. I really liked it for all the reasons we like to say. We like episodes such as no one was hurt, no one died. There were no broad, grand, implications if something was true or not true. So it's just a lot of fun.
Kind of the perfect little conspiracy theory,
Exactly. So anyway, did that, had a lot of fun, and people wanted more. The people spoke, Zach. They said, give me more treasure hunting episodes.
Well, one thing I think that's pretty cool and pretty progressive here about Crackpot HQ is we're elected officials.
It's true.
People vote at the ballot box. And so, this November, we could very well get voted out.
It's possible.
And, to date, we've run 2 successful campaigns, and so we're just trying to, kiss babies, make people smile, and bring them what they want.
That's right.
It's only fair. It's democracy in action.
Exactly.
Although I think we're technically a republic.
Yes, we are a
Democratic republic.
Democratic republic.
Okay, so kind of the same as the U.S. overall. So anyways, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, I'm not really sure how that tied in, but anyway, treasure hunts, man. Treasure hunts. So I found a fun one, and this is one where I'll just come right out and say it. There were 12 treasures hidden. Only 3 of them have been found.
Ooh.
So you can still find these. Not like that last one, where it's just a giant tease the whole time. Get done, it's like, oh, well, good luck. Can't find anything. There is stuff to find here.
Ooh, and also perhaps I should tease my half of the show, the second half.
Yeah, what do you got?
Which also contains hidden treasure, which still has not been claimed to this day.
Nice.
So, folks, you know what? Go ahead and thank us later when you cash in on the millions of dollars.
Exactly. Just remember where you heard it first.
And tithe 10% back
10%,
to
that's right.
Crackpot
10%
HQ.
each. 10% each.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we are talking about... Well, this guy wrote a book. Well, let's start with his name. Byron Preiss, Preiss. He's an author, was an author, children's author and more. But he wrote a book called The Secret, which is not the self-help book, also called The Secret.
I was like, I've
I read that. That was really inspirational.
Ooh, okay, dodged a bullet, okay.
No, this was a different one. This book that he wrote, well, we'll get into it in just a second. It was strictly for treasure hunting purposes. But anyway, Mr. Byron Preiss, born April 1953, died July 9th, 2005 in a tragic car accident, I guess. But he buried 12 treasure chests in the United States and Canada. So there's a plexiglass box, and inside the plexiglass box there's a little I want to say treasure chest, but it's smaller. Okay, right? Smaller thing, and then inside of that there's a key. Okay, and then when you find the key, when you find the whole thing, you take the key to Byron Preiss. Actually, he's dead now, so you take it to his family or his estate, and they will give you a precious gem. And each of these gems is worth, they estimate, somewhere around $1,000. So there's like $9,000 still out there to be found. So not a huge, you can't exactly retire with this treasure, but still kind of cool. Still kind of fun.
Pay down some debt.
Exactly. And all the clues are in the book. So, like I said, buried in secret locations in cities across the United States and Canada. And he said that these symbolically represent events and people that played significant roles in North American history. So he didn't pick, Chanhassen, Minnesota. He picked New York City, or he picked Chicago, or St. Louis, or Toronto. Actually, we don't know all the places, but we do know some. Kind of get to that in just a moment. But yeah, like I said, if you find one, you trade it in, you get an actual precious gem. But all the clues are found in this puzzle book called The Secret, which was published by Bantam in 1982. So this has been going on for quite a while. A lot of these still haven't been found.
42 years.
That's good math, man. Good math.
Don't ask me how I know that.
How do you know 1982 so quickly?
I'm good with numbers.
Okay, good. Thanks, Rain Man. But it was published in 82, and then it was reissued again in 2014. So you can find this. I checked. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on eBay. I don't necessarily know that you can find it at your Barnes & Noble because it is out of print now, super technically. But the book has 12 images and 12 verses. And here's the fun part. You don't know which image corresponds with which verse. So I'll show you some of these in a moment here, but you have these elaborate drawings, paintings of these pictures, and it's like, okay, well, maybe that's, I don't know, Los Angeles, maybe that's San Francisco, maybe it's not, and then you try to find the verse with the clues in it, and you got to match them up, and then you actually have to go there and find them, and so on and so forth. It's pretty darn cool, but these pictures, actually, let me just show you. These pictures kind of remind me a lot of like tarot cards almost. They're full of imagery. They're just full of all sorts of, let's go ahead and scroll through that.
Oh, yeah, they do. They do.
Scroll
Some
to
rider
the,
weight action here.
Yep.
Ooh, wow.
Yep,
I like this. Oh, I really like this.
Yeah. So I don't know. Describe what you're seeing here. Pick one.
Okay. I see one that looks like kind of like a minotaur almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like this minotaur on some sort of almost like a Roman column type thing with trees in the background. Yeah, they're all drawn.
Yep.
The illustrations are really, really well done. There's another one. It's like a knight on a horse on some sort of rock thing holding a flag.
Right.
Maybe a lion and some skulls or something. Yeah, I don't know. They just look really very interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. So this book is super interesting. You can read the first 60 pages for free on Google Books, or I think it's called Google Books. It's a lot about like elves and fairies and like mystical creatures. And he kind of has a story and a glossary and an index and so on. And the second half of the book is kind of explaining some of the different fairies that came from the old land and how they traveled to North America with the colonists and the settlers and everyone else. And then these fairies kind of settled in these areas. And his idea, the story behind all this, is that the fairies buried the treasure and you have to find the treasure. So it's cute. It's fun. It's neat. It's harmless. But we don't know much about it. I mean, we know about Byron Preiss, the guy who wrote it. He's an author. He wrote a bunch of books. He did graphic novels, comic books, illustrated books. He wrote children's books. He was one of the very first to publish a CD-ROM book, which would kind of be an ebook, I suppose. Mm-hmm. He authored or co-authored some celebrity children's books with Billy Crystal, Jane Goodall, Jay Leno, Leanne Rimes, Jerry Seinfeld. So it's like, okay, it's kind of got some chops, I suppose. We don't know as much about the illustrators. So when we're really starting to figure out like how do we solve these pictures, how do we solve these riddles and mysteries? Well, maybe the person who drew the pictures might have some clues. But I have a list of some of the illustrators: John Jude, Palancar, John Perriard, Overton Lloyd, Joellen Trilling, and simple searches of these on Google based on my skills don't really turn up a whole lot. So again, we're kind of back at square one when it comes to this. But when he went out and hid these, so he hid these in the winter of 81 and 82, and then the book was published in 82, so everything was already set by the time the book came out. We do know that he did a North American book tour, And we do know that he stopped in most major cities, but he also he seemed to spend a lot of time in San Francisco. And there hasn't been one found in San Francisco yet. So perhaps that might be a place that people could look. But anyway, let's talk about the first box that was found. The very first box was found in 1983. So it took about a year. And this was image 5. So I'll pull up image 5 here. And they found that image 5 corresponded with verse 12. So this isn't verse 12, but I'm just going to read one of these real quick to give you an idea, an example here of what these sound like. So here's one verse. At the place where jewels abound, 15 rows down to the ground, in the middle of 21 from end to end, only 3 stand watch as the sound of friends fills the afternoon hours. Here's the sovereign people who build palaces to shelter their heads for a night. Gnomes admire, fays delight, the namesakes meeting near the site. So it's like, what?
Yeah, where to even start with that?
Right. So, you look at this and you're like, okay, so they have the sound of friends. Maybe it's like a bell tower, or maybe it's a playground or something like that, or maybe something with noise. Then you have like sovereign people. It's like, oh, okay, that's a clue. We might be able to figure something else out there. But again, you just don't know. So kind of interesting. So 3 friends who used to play Dungeons and Dragons together, they got a hold of this book, they did some sleuthing, and they said, yes, this image 5 is about Grant Park. This is about the Chicago Water Tower. I think we can see the Art Institute of Chicago, and sure enough, they went there, they dug, they found it, and they received an emerald for their troubles.
Not too bad.
Not too bad.
That's impressive they found it just based on the description.
No, right?
And the picture. Okay.
I'll put some of these up on Instagram, of course, and I'll have them linked in the video or shown in the video, so you can see them either way. Second box was found in Cleveland. It's like, okay, Cleveland. Who would have thought that was a great American city? Not me.
Jury's still out.
Jury's still out. But this one, they took 20 more years to find it.
Oh, wow.
So 2004. This was found by 2 lawyers from New York City, and they found it in the Greek Cultural Gardens. And basically the clues they saw there was something about the terminal tower, and there was something about the Greek columns, and they just kept looking and poking around, and sure enough, they found it. The third one was only found in 2019.
Okay.
So they are still out there, folks.
No kidding.
You can still go find these. And this was found in Boston in 2019, like I said. A family was watching the Discovery Channel show. So you may have heard of these before from the Expedition Unknown television show.
Yeah.
Series?
Yeah, it's a cool series, yeah. I've
Never
watched a few episodes, actually.
But not this one.
Mm-mm.
Good.
Maybe I didn't. I found the boxes and I didn't tell anybody.
There you go. Yeah. There's an episode that focused on the secret. This family got super into it, and they were able to find one of these boxes buried in Langone Park. And the way they found this, there was a clue that they figured out had to do with Paul Revere's ride, and just kind of where he went and when he went and so on. But it was the clue said the 18th day in the 12th hour, which, if you know the Longfellow's poem, it talks about that. And the problem they ran into was where they thought it was, they were doing construction work in the park. So they went and they told the construction crew, like, hey, if you dig up a box or something weird, like, let us know, because this is what we're looking for. And sure enough, they did. And they got their precious gem from it all. So not too shabby.
No, that's cool. And it's also encouraging that people are finding stuff.
Yeah.
It's not just like some elaborate hoax or whatever.
Exactly. So a couple other things that we can kind of look at with this to try to figure out some clues. And, like I said, you can't really do it unless you look at the pictures and you start trying to figure out the verses. But we do know that there was a second author. So Byron Preiss was listed as the main author, and then Sean Kelly was listed as another author, and it's not really, we're not sure what he wrote or what he contributed. All we know about Mr. Sean Kelly is that he worked for the National Lampoon for 14 years, from 1970 to 1984. And right after The Secret was published, that had all these clues in it, he published his own book of Irish folk and fairy tales as well. So, and he's been asked 100 times, and he says Byron didn't share any details. He just brought me on to kind of consult and do stuff like that. Another person listed on the book is Ted Mann. All we know is that he's a faculty member in Toronto. I mentioned John Jude Palancar. He was the one that created all 12 of the images. He's from Cleveland, but he didn't know the locations, which is interesting. I mean, maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe he's just forgotten. But if you look at these, and we'll kind of break one down in a minute here, you can start to see it would be hard to make an argument that he had absolutely no idea.
Okay.
If you know what I'm saying.
That's very interesting.
But anyway, yeah. So Byron Preiss, of course, is the main name, and he died in 2005. The company that owned his works and everything else filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and they had to put all of his assets up for auction, which included the gems. However, if you contact them, they will still find a way to get you the gem. No one there knows where anything was buried. His wife didn't know. His kids didn't know. His coworkers and friends and family, no one knew. But they all know what the keys look like. So if you turn in the key, you can do it. But yeah, let me just kind of show you this one. So there is strong suspicion that there is a treasure box buried in Milwaukee. So take a look at this. People think this is the Milwaukee clue.
Okay. Well, you're from Milwaukee, more or less.
More or less, yeah.
So does this look like your high school in the background?
That's my high school. That's actually my band teacher right there in the front. No, it's kind of there's a person in the front wearing, what is that, a blue cloak kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
And like an outline of a tower or a building in the background. But this person in the front appears to be juggling some items. There's a bunch of items up in the air.
Looks
such
like,
as?
Yeah, we got a couple of either red balls or apples, maybe a key, a hammer, a flower of some sort, and either a washer or some sort of round thing with the hole. A donut, I don't know.
Check it out. So that round thing, that washer donut thing,
yeah,
it's suspected that is a mill, okay, that you grind flour with or something, and then you see a little walking cane.
Oh, is that what yeah. I thought it was a hammer. Okay. Yeah.
Walk, and there's the key.
Oh, no. Kid.
See?
The tower, though,
the tower. So the tower, they suspect, looks a little bit like the city hall. The outline of it, at least.
Okay.
So, and then, I don't have it in front of me, but, there's debate as to which verse corresponds with that image, if it is, in fact, Milwaukee. And there's one that mentions the same exact address that City Hall is at, and so on and so forth. But, he said, look, these could be nearly anywhere, but just know that I'm not going to, I don't bury them anywhere near a highway or a railway or a contaminated area. You'll never have to dig in a cemetery. There's nothing in any private land. And the furthest he went down was about 3.5 feet. So that's it. That is kind of all the clues we have. So I just find it so fascinating that someone just has the time and energy and resources to do something that's so fun and fascinating. And just what's in it for him? Like, not really much. Maybe he sells a couple of copies of a book, but that's about it.
Did you happen to come across, like, I almost want to say, like, either anecdotal or witness kind of accounts about how they went about breaking it down and, like, really figuring out the ones that they actually found?
Yeah, there's different breakdowns and things like that, and there's a giant news group about all this, or kind of a message board type thing, and you can really go in there and kind of look at the way people think. The issue is that, like, treasure hunters don't necessarily want to share their secrets.
Huh.
So
I guess that makes sense.
Right. So, I mean, there is a community that is all actively looking for it, but you get the feeling reading through this stuff that people are still holding their cards pretty close to their chests. So there's a lot of these pictograms and like, okay, well, the outline of that kind of looks like the state of Illinois. So we're probably talking about Illinois, maybe, so on and so forth. But so to answer your question, yes and no. You can find some accounts, but it's really, I would say, debatable as to like how accurate even they're being.
Well, now I know that you obviously don't want to reveal your methodology here.
Obviously.
But I'd be curious, like when you took a look at some of those, like did you have any theories, assumptions, anything?
Clueless.
No.
Absolutely clueless.
Yeah.
I mean, the only clues we know, or the only things we know, is that there is one in St. Louis that hasn't been found. There's one in Houston, and there's one in Canada.
Ooh.
That narrows it down.
Yeah, right.
At least one in Canada. And there's some strong suspicions it's Toronto, based on some stuff I've seen, but it's really up to anyone. It's totally there's no good way to figure it out unless you start just really getting out there with a shovel, I think.
Okay, so I guess what's next? Where does this lead us to?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of want to pick up the book and see if I might be able to figure something out.
Well, I was going to say we should get this on the Discord.
There you go. Yeah. The treasure hunting channel on the Discord.
We got to
Why not? I don't know. I think it's fun. I think it's cool that they're still out there. They are actually still out there, supposing they haven't been dug up or destroyed or something. But yeah, guys, I mean, if you know more about this or if you've actually been actively involved in searching for some of these, let me know. I kind of want to hear about it.
Love it. Come on back, folks, after we hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll dig into our second treasure hunt mystery.
Ooh. All right, everybody. Thank you. Welcome back. Please buy all those products that the sponsors just told you about.
Buy them twice. Tell them Crackpot sent you.
That's right. But we're talking treasure hunting today, Zach.
We certainly are. And good news, folks, during the ad break, I found the other Preiss Boxes.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, so
well done.
You know how I just stepped out for a minute?
Yeah, is that where you went?
I got to cash in on those jewels, baby.
Shoot. Wow. All right.
Well, I tell you what, if you are interested in finding lots and lots and lots of treasure, good news. Maybe warm up first. What are those called? The Preiss Boxes, or what was the actual?
Yeah, Preiss Boxes.
Okay, yeah. Warm up with that, and then once you've graduated and found all those, riddles or figured those things out, come over to the Beale Ciphers.
The who?
Beale.
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 All right, like Beale Street.
Like, what's the Beale, folks? I'm sorry, that's a different word. But no, Beale. Beale. It's named after a person. We'll get into all this stuff. Besides me mentioning it just now on the show, Timothy Jermichael, are you familiar with this topic?
No, not a clue.
Okay. Well, similar to yours, obviously we're dealing with some alleged hidden treasure, and spoiler alert, this treasure has not been found to this day.
Oh, alleged. So we don't really know.
No, but this also involves puzzles, more or less. So
okay.
Let's get into this. Turn back the clock to a simpler time, Tim, and head east to the state of Virginia.
Okay.
That's right, that Virginia, the place for lovers. The story begins like this. In the year of 1885 of our Lord, a pamphlet titled The Beale Papers was published by a man named James B. Ward. The pamphlet contained 3 ciphers, or codes, if you will, which, if deciphered, gave the location of treasure buried by a man named Thomas J. Beale in a secret location in Bedford County, Virginia. And by the way, this treasure was buried in and around the year 1820.
Oh.
So this is kind of interesting. The whole story is fascinating.
Okay.
Let's talk about this. The story gets pretty wild. There's some names you need to know. Hang with me. But it goes like this. In about 1817 or so, a man by the name of Thomas Beale led an expedition of about 30 men to the American West. Now remember, this is 30, 40 years after the U.S. became like a country.
Yeah.
So when they headed west, it was the Wild West.
Right.
In fact, most of the states didn't even really exist. Thomas Beale led an expedition of, like I said, 30 men or so. The theory is that they were actually somewhere in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, but all we know is that the treasure that they found out in the Wild West was somewhere north of Nuevo Mexico.
Okay.
So,
all right.
north of New Mexico somewhere. Anyways, Thomas Beale and his crew, over the course of 18 months back in the early 1800s, mined literally thousands of pounds of silver, gold, and jewels, which at the time was worth about $13,000. And let me get into the specifics here, because they unearthed 2,921 pounds of gold, 1,500 pounds of silver, and $1.5 million worth of precious jewels, which now is valued at about, $60 million.
I was going to say, that's more than 13 grand at this point, yeah.
So this ain't no joke, folks. Anyways, the story continues on. After they finished mining, Beale then was entrusted with transporting that treasure back to the East Coast. Why Beale? Why the East Coast? I don't totally know, but I would assume it's because Beale lived in Virginia at some point in time and he led that search party, so probably naturally they gave it back to him.
Yeah.
He was tasked with transporting it back to the East Coast. And also, again, you got to think of the time and the place. It's the 1820s. There probably aren't real reliable conventional banks back then, right?
True,
so it would make sense that you'd bury it and hide it. And that's probably what happened.
Whoa.
So here's what we do know, or we believe happened, which is Beale brought the gold and treasure, all the silver back with him, buried it in or around the city of Lynchburg, Virginia, about 4 miles from the Washington Inn, which was an inn at the time. Okay, that happened.
Okay.
Well, Beale was an adventurer. He's restless. He missed the American West. He wanted to go back out and hunt buffalo, encounter savage grizzlies. I'm quoting here. But, of course, he was unwilling to let his treasure fall into the wrong hands. And, of course, they didn't have conventional banks, like I said earlier. So what does he do? He drafts up a series of ciphers, which, if you look at these puzzles, they're just a bunch of number sequences.
Oh.
So it's not like a puzzle like we just talked about in the sense of you have to kind of figure out what the pictures are. It's really just codex, if you will. Anyway, so Beale's getting restless. He buries the treasure. And what does he do? In 1822, he gives an iron box, like a treasure chest almost, but a smaller box, to an innkeeper in Lynchburg, Virginia, a man by the name of Robert Morris. It's not clear on how the two men knew each other. We can talk more about that later. But, like I said, Morris was the innkeeper. Beale was about to dip out, head west. Hands him over a box. And here's where it gets more interesting. Beale told Morris not to open the box unless he or one of his men failed to return from their journey after 10 years.
Okay, yeah.
So, things continue on. Morris is working at the inn. Beale heads west. And that's kind of it. A few months later, Morris receives a letter from Beale saying, "Hey, I'm good. I'm in St. Louis. All is on course."
Mm-hmm.
And that's the last time anybody ever heard from Beale ever again.
Oh, no. Okay. All right.
Years pass. Now, remember, Morris was supposed to open the box if he didn't return in 10 years. But as it so happens, Morris began... he must have forgotten about it or something because he didn't pick the thing back up for another 20 years.
Okay, yeah.
And at that point in time, he was starting to work on it himself. Which I like this little detail about the fact that, basically he honored the code, if you will.
Yeah, good for him. Good for him.
Didn't touch it. Maybe he forgot about it and then picked it back up.
So just a point of clarification here. So the box is the box, but the cipher code is separate?
Let me explain.
Yeah.
So after 20 years of not opening the box,
yeah,
Morris decides to finally open it. And what does he find? He finds 3 distinct ciphers.
Okay.
3 distinct sheets of paper with code on them, and then a couple of other scraps of paper in there. And that was about it. He would spend about 20 years trying to figure out what they said. And in 1862, a year before Morris died, so this was the innkeeper, he handed the materials to an anonymous acquaintance. Nobody knows who this acquaintance was or is. Nobody knows how they knew each other. But he was able to decode one of the ciphers, so one of the 3.
Yeah.
And it was the second cipher. How did he do this?
Yeah.
Well, he used the Declaration of Independence.
No way. Good for him.
So the cipher was decrypted fairly simply. I mean, it was after years and years and years of trying. Mm-hmm. But the codes are a basic substitution cipher. So each number in that codex represents, a different letter of the alphabet or a different word.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you were able to decrypt it by looking at the Declaration of Independence and the corresponding numbers in the codex.
Yep.
So makes complete sense. Here's what the codex number 2 said. The cipher actually said. It said, and I'm quoting here, "I have deposited in the county of Bedford, about 4 miles from Beaufort's, in an excavation or vault 6 feet below the surface of the ground, the following articles belonging jointly to the parties whose names are given in the number 3." So the third cipher herewith. The first deposit consisted of 1,014 pounds of gold and 3,812 pounds of silver, deposited November 1819. The second was made December 1821 and consisted of 1,907 pounds of gold and 1,288 of silver, also jewels, obtained in St. Louis in exchange to save transportation and valued at $13,000. Oh my God. The above is securely packed in iron pots with iron covers. The vault is roughly lined with stone, and the vessels rest on solid stone and are covered with others. Paper number 1 describes the exact locality of the vault, so that no difficulty will be had in finding it. So, good news, bad news. One of the ciphers was figured out.
Solved, yeah.
The one that tells you where the gold is was not.
Not solved yet.
Correct. So,
all right.
1885 rolls around. This unknown anonymous man that Robert Morris had contacted worked with a publisher, a man by the name of James B. Ward, to actually publish the codex into a pamphlet.
Oh, cool.
And what's kind of cool is you could actually buy this back in the day and try to figure it out for yourself.
For sure.
Well, the hunt begins. And I mean, from that point forward, all bets are off. According to historians, upon breaking the code, the anonymous cryptoanalyst rode a wave of adrenaline that, according to one 19th century author, compelled him to, and I'm quoting here, neglect family, friends, and all legitimate pursuits for what has proved so far the veriest illusion. But it doesn't end there. We had a Chicago refrigeration contractor, certain that he'd broken the code, basically convinced local officials to dig up a graveless patch of a cemetery, only to find clothes and hangers and horseshoes. There was a Texas man who drove to Virginia, his wife and kids in tow, simply to borrow a local roadmap that he believed would lead to the treasure. It didn't. Massachusetts man who jumped out of bed, jolted by a dream, drove bleary-eyed toward the Blue Ridge Mountains to test his prophecy. An Oklahoma psychic who surveyed the Goose Creek Valley from a helicopter. A Virginia Supreme Court justice who scouted the location by bicycle. A Washington State man who hired armed guards. So on and so forth. I mean, a lot of treasure hunters actually went broke. In fact, one man by the name of Stan Shastovsky spent $70,000 of his own money on dynamite and bulldozers in the early 80s, bankrupting himself after blasting rocks for 6 months.
It's a good way to get bankrupt, though. I'll be honest. If you're going to go bankrupt, at least blow up some rocks.
Have a little fun in the process.
What?
Well, an editor at the American Cryptography Association also spent so much time that he focused on the ciphers, and he was eventually fired from his job. So professionals are actually taking interest in this thing.
A professional cryptographer was fired?
Yeah,
for spending too much time solving the riddle, the clues.
And my favorite part is he actually has a quote. Listen to what he said. He said, "This was possibly the worst decision I ever made. If I would have devoted all the hours spent pursuing this treasure legend to the study of medicine, I would easily have become an accomplished neurosurgeon."
Oh my God. Okay.
I said the same thing about this show, folks.
Thank you. Yes.
In the 1930s, a man by the name of William F. Friedman, he was the leader of the U.S. Army Signal Intelligence Service, SIS, a forerunner of the NSA. He spent his leisure hours attempting to untangle the codes. He took them so seriously that his legal counselor drafted an agreement in case he solved them.
Oh, wow.
In 1969, an organization that he kickstarted was called the Beale Cipher Association. The BCA shorthand, hosted symposiums in Washington, D.C. They rounded up around 70 people and met year over year. I mean, they had district court judges. The governor of Minnesota at the time showed up. I mean, like, actual professionals. People were, like, devoted to this.
Unbelievable.
And here's what's frustrating about this, Tim. We know that the second cipher was basically figured out by looking at the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
That was the key to all of this.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so a lot of these people are looking at the codes. They're also just scrounging around significant works of human history, whether it's the Louisiana Purchase documents, Shakespearean plays, the Magna Carta,
the Constitution.
Yes, the Monroe Doctrine, the Star-Spangled Banner, the Lord's Prayer, the Songs of Solomon, the Book of Psalms, newspapers, Molasses Act of 1733. All of that to say, nobody's been able to crack it. However, cryptanalysts say a second grader could break the ciphers if he or she just unlocked one of the documents. You know, one of these things that could help you decode it.
Yeah, well, if you had almost all the clues, you could probably figure it out.
Who knew, right?
Wow. Okay, thanks.
But here is one of the issues, which is, you know, depending on who you believe, the ciphers are either legitimate and decipherable, or they're not. I read a quote, and I forgot who it was offhand. It was one of the CIA cryptographers, and he was saying something to the effect of, like, and this is just a loose paraphrase, he said something like, you know, Sunday through Wednesday, I believe it's real. Thursday through the weekend, I believe it's fake, right?
Right. So, okay, why would it be fake? What points us in that direction?
Probably the biggest reason why is because nobody can really pinpoint who this Thomas Beale was.
Okay.
One of the challenges, of course, when you go back to the early 1800s is, like, the census records documents aren't always consistent or always consistently filled out. So when they went back and looked at census records in 1810 show two people in the U.S. named Thomas Beale, one in Connecticut and one in New Hampshire. But the other issue is, like, in 1820, the U.S. Census listed other people, but they didn't exist anywhere in Virginia at the time. And the other issue is, before 1850, the U.S. Census records only included the heads of households. So he could have been living with somebody else. Sure, they didn't record his name. So to begin with, nobody knows even who Thomas Beale was, and or if he was even real.
Well, someone was real because someone wrote the ciphers and handed them to that hotel guy, right?
True. That is true. Probably the one piece of evidence that would suggest Thomas Beale was a real person is that Carl Nelson Jr., an ex-CIA agent, combed through old newspapers from St. Louis, and he found what appeared to be some sort of postmaster's notice, more or less for, like, an arrest warrant, I guess, for an S.T. Beale, spelled slightly differently than how Thomas Beale was, you know, spelled previously. So a reference to a person that might be the same guy dating from around the same time.
Okay.
But there is one other piece of evidence that would suggest maybe this isn't real, which is evidently, you know, perhaps there wasn't really any of these types of precious metals or jewels found in and around Colorado, you know, at this exact time. Mm-hmm. So...
Well, you're saying... maybe he was real, maybe he did the ciphers, but maybe there was no treasure?
Yeah, that. Or maybe he wasn't real. The innkeeper made this whole thing up.
Okay.
And none of this is just a wild goose chase.
I don't know. Yeah, okay. I suppose.
So, okay, we don't know. There's some inconsistencies, obviously, in terms of who Beale was, whether or not it ever happened. There's no recorded history that anybody could find that had documentation of a large party of 30 people heading out west to go search for gold. But I mean, again, it's the American West, so who even knows? Also, there are some issues, and this is where it gets into depending on how you talk about this stuff. It turns out there are multiple versions of the Declaration of Independence, too. So even depending on which one, because, of course, they were handwritten, right? So there are some slight variations in that document, which... according to some cryptographers, like, when they go in and try to run it through, like, AI and different computer models, actually turn out basically gobbledygook.
Oh, no.
So we actually don't know. We're stuck with one of probably 3 or 4 possibilities. One is This is legit.
Yes.
Beale found a bunch of treasure, buried it within 4 miles of the old Washington Inn in Lynchburg, 6 feet underground.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. Another possibility is this was just the flight of fancy of somebody who ran an inn and then turned it over to somebody else to publish, and then just created this whole wild goose chase.
Yeah, he just wanted people to come visit the area, right?
Right.
Stay at his inn.
Right. Or I suppose maybe a little bit of both. Maybe some of it's real, some of it's not. Maybe it's a much smaller treasure than what's alleged. Right. I don't actually know. Nobody knows.
So it's like thousands of pounds, right?
That's right.
Of gold and silver and other things, right?
Precious jewels, yeah.
Thousands. So he took that all the way from Colorado.
Yes.
Through St. Louis, apparently, all the way to Virginia.
Yeah.
And how many people were in his party?
Well, from what I can tell, so there were 30 that went out west.
Uh-huh.
How many went back with him to bury it? I don't know.
Okay.
So it might have been just him lugging that back himself. He said, like, according to what was said, is that he exchanged some of the gold and silver for jewels because it was probably too heavy to haul back.
Okay.
But still, it's a significant amount of money.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, why didn't the other people in his party want their share of it?
Well, it makes you wonder. Maybe they did. Maybe they got their fair share. Or maybe they were promised more when they went back to go mine up some more, and then they'd return back, and then he'd divvy it all up. Maybe they found a pay streak in there somewhere, and they're like, oh, we got to go back and get the rest, and then once we're all done, we'll settle the accounts.
Yeah.
You don't know, but nobody ever came back, and that was that.
I think it's real.
Do you?
I think it's real, but that's a lot of gold.
It's a lot of gold. And
I don't know how you like move that around, like actually physically move that around and then dig a hole and bury it without, gaining attention to yourself.
Well, and this is one of the issues. Depending on who you ask. Like if I got 100 people in a row after they listen to this episode, you might get 100 different answers. And when you go and you look into what people are saying, I mean, there are various conspiracy theories about what really even happened to this to begin with. So one person believed, and this was, I believe, the daughter of the man who published that pamphlet. She said she believed it was a Masonic allegory.
Oh, okay.
Like the Codex was some sort of Masonic allegory. Some people believe the treasure was found and dug up and never reported out. Yep. So basically just like kept secret.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Some believe the federal government found it and then of course didn't tell anybody.
Because why would they?
I read a quote. It was like, we all know there was a task force by the NSA sending people out into the woods disguised as U.S. Forest Service workers.
Oh, Jesus.
Like, yeah, we all know that.
Everyone knows that. Yeah, duh.
But I think, to be totally frank with you, whether or not it's real, and I kind of think it was real.
Uh-huh.
I really actually do. I think whether or not the gold and treasure exists is almost besides the point, because I think the intrigue that people have around this treasure is absolutely real.
Yeah.
And I found a great quote by a man, Peter Weimeister, who wrote a book on the topic called The Beale Treasure, A History of a Mystery. He summarized it pretty well when he said, and I'm quoting here, once you get the Beale treasure in your system, it is hard to get out. You could get possessed by it, like drugs or gambling. It can lead a vulnerable person to stake everything on a dream.
Well, man, you are talking to the right person. This is that's all I need.
So what do you think, man?
I think we quit the podcast and we become full-time professional treasure hunters. $60 million?
It's no joke. I don't want to...
that's more than just like $1,000 gem, which don't get me wrong, I'm not going to turn it down, but that's real.
Yeah, we're not talking about a couple of $1,000 here, folks.
Wow. And all you got to do, 4-mile radius, you can do the math, right? Quick.
That's, yeah, I can.
How many acres? How many basketballs? I'm not doing
no, I don't, I don't do the math on the fly for people. Okay. It's too embarrassing for them. So, but here's what I'll tell you, which is you can go out, you can pull this codex off the web. It's just a bunch of numbers. My suggestion would be to look at various historical documents, see if you can make sense of any of it. And if you can, well, $60 million is all yours. And I found out that the state of Virginia has basically a finder's keeper's law.
Oh, nice.
So the title is in yours name, man. 100%, man.
Which is an issue. It's actually an issue when it comes to the other one we talked about, the Preiss Boxes, because there are some places, I want to say like New York, for example, where if you dig up anything in the city of New York, it is New York's property. So you have to... there's like all these things you have to, hoops you have to jump through and so on. So you're saying look at historical documents.
That's right.
And try to line up the numbers with it.
Yeah. And I haven't seen this anywhere in my research, but like just run it through Gemini, ChatGPT, see what it tells you. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's thought to do that yet.
I doubt it.
Better do that before this airs.
Oh.
So what if it's not a historical document he referenced? What if he was actually like, psychic? And it's like maybe he used Harry Potter.
I don't know, Tim.
Maybe he used some Tom Clancy novel.
Here's what I think maybe happened, which is what if like that innkeeper like swapped out like the location of the codex and just put like gobbledygook town. Maybe
just
he
a
found
bunch of random numbers.
Yeah. To throw everybody off the trail.
Well, I mean, he hung on to it for like 20 years. So maybe he was searching for 10 and he's like, oh, I guess I found it. Maybe I should publish this and let everyone else have a look. Even though he already, ducked out with a cool 60 million or whatever.
It's hard to say, but this was a super interesting treasure
so
hunt.
Wild. Man, I want to hear more about these. Is this an American thing? I mean, treasure hunting has to be international.
That's a really fair question. Yeah, I don't feel like we hear about this too much. You hear about some of this stuff as it relates like the Lost Ark,
Yeah.
Like it's more of like unintentionally lost stuff or whatever. But like these treasure hunts are geocaching, whatever you want to call it, is like it's a uniquely American thing. I don't know.
That is so cool. Well, anyways, guys, if you know of any of these in your country, your region, or anywhere for that matter, let us know. Because, I got some vacation time I'm looking to take off, so...
Yeah, I just got a new shovel, so let's go.
Well, there we go. All right, everybody. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in this week. It's a fun little topic. We like doing these. Wouldn't have thought of doing treasure hunting shows if it weren't for you guys. So keep those suggestions coming. Thank you. And if you weren't aware, we have a Patreon where you can listen to all these shows without any ads in them. Zach, where can they find that?
Patreon.com/crackpotpodcast. And I will say we also put out a weekly bonus show. So it's not just, ad-free content. It's also, you get another show every week. So check it out.
Yeah, sorry. Of course, yes. Anyway, guys, please, if you haven't already, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local ditch digger about our podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.